Good morning and welcome to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if Poland became an empire. Poland, the punching bag of Europe, as many would say. But this is not really always the truth. Poland actually was a pretty strong country that already existed in the 900s. And in there, Poland had actually very good kings who managed to make good relations with other European countries, such as the Holy Roman Empire at that time. They also Christianized and thus becoming part of the European powers at those times. But they also had like a lot of problems and a lot of infighting, and there was also this thing that they actually ceased to exist like for 3 times. First time would be due to internal struggle, the second time because of the partitions that happened, and the third time, well, during World War II. Since I'm also like half Polish, I always ask myself, how could Poland, not have like survived during those years? Why didn't they survive? And what would actually Poland need to become an empire? Most of you guys will say, oh, Russia is the main problem, or Germany, and perhaps a tiny minority will even mention Austria. But I think this is far from the truth. See, the Polish political system was a very special one and also very complicated one, because it was something like a noble republic or an elective monarchy. And the nobility had a lot of power, and there was not really a central authority, which meant that basically it was very difficult to take some choices and decisions in Poland. Sigismund II Augustus, who died in 1572, thought that by adopting this elective monarchy, or the noble republic, he could preserve the Jagiellon dynasty on the throne. But as we all know, this was far from the truth. With the elective monarchy, many negative things actually happened to Poland, and it brought many unnecessary wars. Let's say like with the House of Vasa, who actually had differences with Sweden, and also instability, and well, at the end Poland-Lithuania experienced a slow but steady decline. Yes, Poland-Lithuania had also a good share of, let's say, philosophers or bright thinkers during those years, but the negative aspects, they outweighed the positive ones. So what if Poland became an empire? What if Sigismund II Augustus never introduced the elective monarchy? First of all, it is more than clear that the dynasty might change after some time, as it does in many countries. There are of course few exceptions, but I won't go into details. In those days, the biggest threat was the Ottoman Empire, without any exception, and only much later would Russia or Muscovy become the #1 threat. However, in the years of 1572, Russia-Muscovy was not very much united, and they actually had a civil war in the years of 1598 until 1613. And Poland in OTL managed to intervene, even gain territories, and they placed for some months a false king or Tsar who called himself Dimitri. So he is nowadays called false Dimitri I. But because Poland would actually be able to impose themselves and impose actually Dimitri as the new Russian Tsar, he would be known as Dimitri I. And at first, Poland-Lithuania in general, they would actually hope to gain like a new ally with Dmitry I. But the king would actually know that with Dmitry I, he would manage to weaken Russia in the long run and thus strengthen the position of the Commonwealth. So let's say if we have here now, we have here like let's say Denmark, then Sweden up. Yeah, in here I won't draw it, but let's say Poland, Lithuania, it would go until here, and then Russia would be here, and they would actually manage to take step by step a lot of territories. Although it's not very good drawn, but I guess you will get the bigger picture. The Catholic Church also supported the decision of Poland because they hoped they could gain more influence, and later on, shortly after the Polish-Lithuanian intervention, Poland as well as Russia under Dmitry I would try to fight the Ottomans, but without much success as in OTL. Russia would soon face more troubles, and the Poles as well as Russia, or the Russian loyalists to Dmitry I, they would try to support Dmitry in his few key territories, whereas other parts of Russia they would slowly become independent, and Sweden would actually take some territories of Russia because they would say, look, we were actually an ally of the Tsar before Dmitry, and we will just occupy those territories because we want to help our ally with such a pretext. And the Ottomans and some local and native population, they would also or gain new territories like the Ottomans or just become independent for a short moment. Poland would most likely expand eastwards. Sweden would be able to occupy, as I said, some parts of the north, and the alliance that Poland would have with Dmitry would still be somehow useful to attack the Ottomans. Centralization in Poland-Lithuania would not have everywhere friends, of course, and it is very likely that Poland might face internal struggles. However, in this scenario, Poland wouldn't lose so much of the territories, and if they would, it would be just for a short moment. It is very likely that under such pressure to centralize, you would never see the rise of Prussia, and it would be probably degraded into a province of the Polish crown. Lithuania would still have similar rights as the Crown of Poland, while the Ruthenians, or the Proto-Ukrainians, would probably rebel. Without a strong Russia and a different king, who perhaps would like to unite all of his subjects, we might see the creation of a third territory within the Commonwealth, and it would probably become the territory of the Ruthenians. Much to the dislike of the nobles, and probably some of the nobles, they would just be dead. Which means that in return the king would gain more power. The Commonwealth, due to their support to Dmitry I or his successor and conflicts within the border regions, or well, actually expansion to Russia, they would never participate in the 30 Years' War. Thus, the 30 Years' War would not be changed, and it would only be after the war where we could see the Commonwealth try to gain maybe Bohemia or influence the Holy Roman Empire to some extent, but not so much. And due to their different position and stronger position in, well, themselves and also within Eastern Europe, The Commonwealth might actually have allied Austria successfully, and both could actually stay allies for a long time, and just like in OTL they would intervene in the Battle of Vienna. However, in this timeline the Commonwealth would also spread southwards with Austria, including what is known today as Romania, and perhaps going so far to influence Bulgaria or even Greece. It could be very likely to see a power-hungry king who would wish to make, let's say, like a third Rome of the Commonwealth by taking Constantinople. As a result, and due to the problems that the Ottomans would pose, Poland and Austria would become good allies. Russia would take the OTL position of Poland. Many foreign powers, they would fight wars in the areas of Russia and actually take Russia piece by piece, except for the main areas which would still be held by Dmitry I's dynasty. Afterwards, it is very likely that this area would be integrated within the Commonwealth, just like Prussia for instance, and be absorbed. The territory could become part of the Polish crown in case the king would be able to place a relative as a duke, for instance, or in case he would marry one of the daughters of Dmitry I or granddaughters, and in case that his dynasty would never produce any male offsprings. As for Ruthenia, well, Ruthenia would be more calm as they would not have anyone who could support them, and they would feel more equal within the Commonwealth because they would have their own, not independent territory, but their own autonomy. And the nobles, they would feel as on the same level as the Lithuanians and the Poles, and also probably slowly be Polonized. Only the Ottomans and Sweden, of course, they could cause some problems. But the Commonwealth would never face them alone in that case, and thus they would be able to win more wars, more battles, and become the dominant power of Eastern Europe. Even starting maybe a golden age in there. Wars would pass, and Poland would expand eastwards. Why eastwards? Because in the west they would be blocked by Austria, as well as a bit southwards, and because Austria would want to influence the areas of the Holy Roman Empire, Poland would probably not try to meddle in because they want to stay allied. Well, north in there, they would have the problem with Sweden, which would make things more complicated. In the south or southeast, you would still have the Ottomans, who were not yet the sick men of the Balkans, and thus everything would go eastwards. And Siberia, for instance, would become a Polish playground. And because they would be somewhat blocked, as I said, in the west and also in the north and the south, it would be the only place where they could expand, and they would do so consistently. The agricultural regression as well as the disintegration of towns and cities would not happen, simply because the wars would never happen within Poland and they would just happen outside. The economy would not take a heavy toll and even manage to expand due to the expansion and exploitation of the newly conquered areas, especially Siberia. With the increasingly absolutistic tendencies in Europe, the Commonwealth would also experience their own share of absolutism. However, absolutism within the Commonwealth would not work, because the Commonwealth would just be too diverse that absolutism might be imposed. So once the king would try to impose himself as an absolutistic ruler, we would see that he would face a lot of rebellions because of the nature itself of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth in ATL would not only be inhabited by Poles and Lithuanians, but also by Ruthenians, Jews, Russian, Tatars, Latvians, Estonians, Germans, Romanians, Finno-Ugric people, and many other native population which maybe nowadays we don't have any knowledge about. And thus the rebellion would be strong enough to stop those tendencies. Probably some countries like Sweden and the Ottomans would try to take advantage of Poland and take away some territories, but at the end they would manage to have the lesson learned, kings especially, where they would actually come back to just accept the centralization that they already had in place, but without making a too strong Polonization, because it would just not be possible. And Poland in that case, or the Commonwealth in that case, would not be like Russia, because the amount or the percentage of the Poles within the Commonwealth would be too small if we compare it with the other peoples that exist in the Commonwealth. So as a result, the Commonwealth would stay a very tolerant country, and it would actually become a very multicultural country as well, much to the unlike Poland in our timeline, where we have like 99% Poles. In that case we would have maybe 20%, let's say. Religions, they would also be very tolerated, especially the Christian faiths, and especially Orthodoxy would be on par with Catholicism and maybe even Protestantism, well, Judaism as well. Islam, well, for Islam it depends. In OTL, the Tatars, they were actually allowed to practice Islam, so I think we would also have a chance to see that Islam would be tolerated at least. Basically, such a timeline would not mean that Poland would just replace Russia, but the Commonwealth would have to accept that it's not just Polish by nature, and thus not alienating the other peoples within the Commonwealth, but eventually we might see the formation of a new Slavic identity based on the language. Pan-Slavism could actually gain some foothold later on in the Commonwealth. Would Napoleon still exist and conquer almost all of Europe? That's actually difficult to say, but eventually Europe would have to change, be it through wars or through reformation. Due to Austria's dominant position and a good ally, the Commonwealth, it is almost guaranteed that they would slowly but surely centralize the Holy Roman Empire, seeing what the Commonwealth did, but at the same time somehow giving like tiny amount of autonomy to, like, let's say Saxony or Bohemia and so on. And actually it is then also guaranteed that this new Holy Roman Empire would probably replace OTL Germany. And with the Ottomans declining in importance, as well as Sweden, the alliance between the Holy Roman Empire and the Commonwealth could break at any moment. And it is very, very real that the Commonwealth could seek an alliance with France, because the French would also see this new Holy Roman Empire as a problem, and this in return would actually push Britain to ally themselves with the HRE in order to prevent an imbalance in Europe. Fast forward, communism or the Bolshevik Revolution would never actually see a big importance or big role in Europe, and Europe would stay pretty much monarchistic and very conservative. And at this point it is very difficult to say what could have happened, but I suggest that if we move somewhat further, that the Balkan would become like a playground between Polish influence and also the Holy Roman Empire influence. What else? We could also see that the Polish influence in the Caucasus would actually exist and even go maybe until Turkey or the Middle East, Iran. And it might even go so far that the Commonwealth might become a superpower and somehow replace the Soviet Union in that sense. And they could compete first against the HRE, and I think that the HRE would actually not have actually much a chance against the Commonwealth, and thus later on the Commonwealth, they would compete then against Britain. And I think Britain would very likely still stay the most dominant power in the world. So the two dominant powers in that timeline at the end would be Britain and the Commonwealth, who would then have like a Cold War.
That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.